Members, I call Committee of the Whole on Bill 15, Infrastructure Projects Act, to order. We are on Clause 4. Shall Clause 4 pass? Aye. Recognizing the member for Kelowna Mission.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Before we broke yesterday, we were discussing matters around formal and informal processes for designation, and I flagged concerns about well-connected NDP insiders having access to the Premier's office and doing advanced soundings before major projects seeking designation entered the process. The minister was on quite a jeremiad about the cleanliness and purity of her government and about how they would never be influenced by well-connected former cabinet ministers or NDP insiders lobbying for projects to be designated. So I did just want to check, will the minister commit to publishing all in-person and virtual meetings logged under the Lobbyist Transparency Act in relation to designations or other powers under this bill before cabinet votes on a designation?
Recognizing the Minister of Infrastructure.
Thank you, Chair. Certainly, government and all ministers, all public servants are expected to abide by the rules of the Lobbyist Transparency Act. We would expect all lobbyists that interact with government to also abide by the Lobbyist Transparency Act, including all of the disclosures that are required in that act. Further, all minister calendars, deputy minister calendars, and the calendars of associated and assistant deputy ministers are proactively disclosed on a monthly basis publicly.
Recognizing the member for Kelowna Mission.
Thank you. Obviously, this bill is not yet enforced, but the government has designated 18 priority projects, which obviously establish precedent or establish expectations around government will pick winners, how government will pick winners and losers. Could the minister just let us know whether she or the Premier or any other member of Cabinet met with lobbyists representing any of those projects before they were designated as priority projects by the government?
Member, I just hope that you might be able to help me understand how that's relevant to Clause 4.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We canvassed this matter quite extensively during yesterday's discussion, and the issue that I flagged is that we have laid out by the bill a formal process for establishing the designation of projects, and I raised the concern that any rational commercial actor that was going to go through not only the cost of seeking designation, but also the risks associated with disclosures necessary for designation, would, in all likelihood in the real world, sound out the government in advance, likely on a government relations basis, in order to establish whether their project was likely to be supported by the government. We had extensive discussion around the possibilities that created for picking winners and losers by the government, and I flagged the concern that has been written about in media about well-connected NDP insiders, doing very well off of providing access to government in order to take soundings around those major projects, because with the new, very arbitrary, sweeping powers being granted to government, it would be reasonable to assume that the minister will likely be the most lobbied minister in government if this bill passes, because she and her ministry will have a tremendous amount of power to determine the fate of projects. So I think it's very important for us to understand the thinking that has gone into the bill, the process that has gone into the designation of these 18 projects, and frankly, to canvass the minister's understanding of how the government relations world is likely to interact with her powers under the bill. So hence the question.
Thank you, member. I watched your question yesterday, so I certainly appreciate your comments. Perhaps you might just word your question differently, because I'm just not seeing how this is connected to Clause 4. Thank you.
Thank you. I assume it would be reasonable to believe that the 18 projects this government has been talking about for some months will be designated projects. Is that a fair assumption?
Recognizing the Minister of Infrastructure.
Thank you, Chair. I have not had any conversations with any private sector project proponents about their projects in relation to any designation under Bill 15.
Recognizing the member for Kelowna Mission.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to understand what was happening in terms of those conversations, so I took the liberty of taking a look at the lobbyist registry. And the Premier has had 55 active lobbyist hits around infrastructure in the last 12 months. So I'd really like to understand if the Minister for Infrastructure is being shielded from or cut out from conversations the Premier is having with project proponents who might very well wish to be designated. It really gives me some concern, because if the Minister for Infrastructure isn't the real decision maker, but it's actually happening through the Premier's office, and the Minister for Infrastructure is unaware of the meetings that the Premier is having with project proponents, potentially facilitated by well-connected NDP insiders, that makes me really very concerned. So could the Minister just tell us a little bit more about the process that is being used or will be used to shield the designation process from top-down, Premier's office-driven lobbying?
Recognizing the Minister of Infrastructure.
Thank you, Chair. I'm glad that the member was able to retrieve information about where registered lobbyists were having conversations throughout government. I think it points to the importance of the Lobbyist Transparency Act, which is work that our government did in order to ensure that BC had the most stringent and transparent lobbying regime in the country. And the reason why the member has that information is because the Transparency Act is working. Aside from that, all of the other comments the member is making are highly speculative, so I won't address them. And I will clarify also that the Section 4, the very first few words of the section, notes that the decision maker is the Lieutenant Governor and Council.
Recognizing the member for Kelowna Mission.
Thank you very much. I note that infrastructure lobbying is up 11.3% from 212 to 236 registrations from the day before the writ dropped to today. So certainly there has been a significant increase in lobbying. It appears that somehow the Minister for Infrastructure is not being lobbied by any of these infrastructure-related government relations professionals who are seeking to influence government around decisions that could include designation for the purposes of this bill. I know that the Minister is a principled individual who firmly believes she's doing the right thing in this situation, but I do believe that sunlight is the best disinfectant, and it's very important that we have cleanliness around these very significant, very sweeping, very arbitrary powers. There is nothing that a project proponent could want more than an assurance from the Premier's office or an assurance from the Minister that they are in fact looked upon favorably. And as I speculated upon in the previous conversation yesterday, it would be reasonable for them to assume that procuring the services of a well-connected NDP insider as a lobbyist might be one way to elicit that information. Whether that elicits a decision or not, eliciting information as to whether they are likely to be favored with designated project status has a tremendous commercial value to a project proponent. And that is something that I'm sure they would pay a government relations professional for handsomely. So I would just, again, like to ask the minister to clarify what kind of proactive shield against conflict has been put in place to make sure that we're not seeing that kind of activity. What was put in place with regard to the 18 projects that this government very proudly talks about designating as priorities, and what will be put in place in order to make absolutely sure the public can have confidence that NDP insiders aren't stacking the deck in regards to what projects get designated.
Member, I've watched this debate yesterday. I've given you a bit of latitude today. This is beginning to get quite repetitive, so I would ask that you move on to another line of questioning or reframe your question altogether. That isn't on this exact same question which the minister has given a response to. I know you may not like the response, but the purpose is to go through, to be able to have discussion on the clauses that relate to this bill. Thank you.
Respectfully, I believe that understanding the formal and informal processes behind designation is crucially important to any member of the public having confidence in this bill. So let me be very specific. The former president of the NDP has 11 lobbying clients, according to the lobbyist registry. The former executive director of the NDP has 9 lobbying clients, according to the registry. I can see a former MLA in my notes who has 31 lobbying clients, according to the registry. I see another former cabinet minister with 16 lobbying clients, according to the registry. And the former chief fundraiser for the NDP has 29 lobbyist registries right now. So can the minister just confirm that none of those 5 NDP insiders are lobbying for any client who is on the list of 18 or any client who is pursuing designation in the future if this bill is passed? Because again, the public ought to be able to have transparency to understand how these decisions are really being made. Not the fantasy land purity of Gantt charts, but the real how the sausage is made. This has been speculated upon in media. Is an area of significant concern? Is it an area of competitive fairness? We are talking about a bill that enables projects to skip to the front of the line. Skipping to the front of the line, saving months or years, has millions and millions and millions of dollars in value. And here we have 5 NDP insiders who are lobbyists, who have access to the Premier's office, access to cabinet, and I'm just curious to understand whether any of them are representing clients who have been or will be prioritized, because the public absolutely deserves to have that information and will demand scrutiny. Will demand scrutiny around how these designations are made. I know that the minister wants to believe that this is a project management issue, wants to believe that this is all being done on the up and up. But the reality is, again, there are well-connected, well-heeled, well-paid NDP insiders making their living off of providing access to government, information to government, and an understanding of how government might make decisions. So please, can the minister outline exactly how appropriate shields are being put up around this designation process to make absolutely sure the public can have confidence that it is a rigorous due diligence process, not a pay-to-play process?
Recognizing the Minister of Infrastructure.
Thank you, Chair. I agree that the line of questioning is getting quite repetitive. I believe I have provided all of the responses that I can offer. But in the interest of responding in good faith, I will assemble them once more for the member. All members of the Executive Council must adhere to the Conflict of Interest Act and all provisions within that, the Lobbying Transparency Act and all of its provisions, the Capital Asset Management Framework, which does include sections on ethics, on procurement, on reporting and auditing. We are subject to investigations by the Auditor General, according to their office. We have proactive disclosure of all calendars under the Freedom of Information Act and are subject to all the provisions of the Freedom of Information Act. And the decision maker on designation of projects is the Lieutenant Governor in Council. And I can confirm once more that I have not had any conversations with any private sector proponents about their projects in relation to the designation under Bill, in relation to designations under Bill 15, nor has my Deputy Minister, nor have any of our ADMs that we are aware of. With that, Chair, I move that committee rise, report progress, and ask the leave to sit again.
Members have heard the question. Those in favor indicate aye. Aye. Those opposed indicate nay. Motion's carried. The committee stands adjourned.